1970. I was just ordained a priest, and it was in Los Angeles, the first one. Today, they have, the United States and Canada, well over 200 churches, several bishops, educational centers, printing of books in all languages. They've adopted in every community that they're in English liturgy, because they see that they're ingrained here. They have monasteries in the United States, and they still have about 10 million people in Egypt. But again, they're being persecuted. They're being persecuted. After King Farouk was ousted, and the British were in authority, and then Gamal Abdel Nasser came in, Nasser began to more or less nationalize everything. And that meant bank accounts were being nationalized too. In the 50s, the Christians picked up and began to sneak out any way they can. And again, our Melkite church in Egypt, which was mainly made up of Syria, Lebanon, people went there several hundred years ago because it was a good life and they could make some money and live. Our church there was 40,000 people in Egypt. Today, since 1958 until today, we can't count 4,000 people. 4,000. Okay? Why? Because, again, they weren't comfortable. They weren't too comfortable in Islamic country. In Syria, Lebanon, it's very interesting. Again, when Syria was created an individual country, they had 5 or 6 presidents in a period of 2 or 3 years until the lion took over, Assad, who died just several years back, and his son now is the president. He was a dictator, and he came from a political party, a very small minority of Islam, that is unique because they're very, very few. But he was a dictator, and he controlled radicalism, and he ran Syria as a secular government. But he was Islamic, of course. But he welcomed Christianity there. He welcomed it there. His son, who is now the president, is still a dictator in a sense, but having been trained in the West, in London and England and all, he's much more open to the Western world, although the United States still calls him a terrorist. And he's opened up the country phenomenally. And Christianity is alive there. And even when the Pope went there, Pope John Paul, when he made that pilgrimage to Syria, the president was with him many places. And he said, Syria is the cradle of Christianity, and Syria without Christians is nothing. So there's an openness and a willingness to work there. But when the larger body is still Islamic, who don't understand Christianity, and the economic problems that have been going on, particularly through the Israeli-Arab wars that Syria also was involved with, people look at the future and they say, will my children be able to live here peacefully? And they get up and they move. Lebanon was unique because of all the countries around it were Islamic because of the numbers. When they pushed for their freedom, they were under the French mandate, and the French were Christian. So they pushed France when they formed their country in 1943. They pushed France to do it on a cycle of majorities. Who's the majority numbers here? The majority happened to be Christian. 70% of Lebanon, what is modern-day Lebanon, was Christian. So, unwritten law, the president always had to be a Christian, but not even that, he always had to be a Maronite Christian. If I was born in Lebanon, I'd consider myself second class based on American thinking because I'm Melkite and I couldn't be the president ever. And then the head of the parliament was a Sunni Muslim, and the next guy was a Shiite Muslim, and because of so they created a Christian government because they were afraid of this. Well, the war that they had for a number of years turned into a civil war, and it uprooted and changed the numbers 70 Christian, 30 Muslim, to 30 Christian and 70 Muslim in a matter of 14 years, 15 years. Again, people are afraid. They see, and particularly Lebanon is having so much trouble with the government, and then you have a group that formed out there after 9/11, all the problems that we created after that ourselves sometimes, and the radical Islam began to take over from Iran. And Hezbollah was born, and now they want into the government, which they do have a place, but they want more. So there's constant turmoil in these countries. Again, the peace-loving Christians, what do? Pick up and leave. There were not too many really tortured for their faith in these countries. There were some problems in Syria and in Lebanon. In 1860, there were some uprisings of Muslims against the Christians, but not to the great extent that we would expect. Because the Muslims, in basic belief, accept the Christians and the Jews as people of the book, and they respect that. They accept Jesus Christ also as the Son of a Virgin, and no human father. Of course, the problem with Islam is that they don't have a teacher, one teacher. We, the church, teaches Christianity and explains to us our faith and the scriptures and everything. But Islam doesn't. Everybody can be their own teacher in Islam, and they do. So you don't like your imam, who's your religious leader, you pick up and you grab some people and you go down the street and you open a new mosque and you get an imam that you like. With the Ottoman Empire particularly, forcing Christianity and anyone who lived there to be under that regime, they united civil and religious together. So today in Syria and in Lebanon, particularly Lebanon, they don't have what we call in the United States a civil marriage. All Christians must get married in their own church. And if they need an annulment, they go to their own church, or the Orthodox, whatever it may be, Orthodox or Catholic. The government doesn't get involved in that. It's the religious heads that do. So they tied religion and politics together. And that's why when we hear of the Middle East and listen to the news reports, we're always seeing friction taking place and church people speaking about the politics. Again, coming from the United States where we separate that, it's very big difference, very big difference. So Lebanon has changed in numbers today, and more Christians are leaving because of the economy, and they see a future that if they really wanted to go democratic, like we accept democracy, the will of the people, who's going to be elected when 70% of the people are Muslim? They're going to elect a Muslim president. And that whole thing will be restructured. The Syriac church exists in Lebanon because that was part of Greater Syria, and it exists in Syria. And they were a persecuted church, and they had to move from villages in southern Turkey, which is southern Turkey today, which was part of Syria, and into the bigger cities, and they took their traditions, like the Armenians in 1918, pushed out by the Ottomans also, and then by Russia later, after the Ottomans got conquered. Then the Russians came in and did a number on them, and these people fled into Syria, Lebanon. So you'll find large Armenian communities in those countries today. So all of the different traditions are existing in the same countries. We come to a very important one. Of course, we're hearing a lot about it today, Father mentioned, in Iraq. Iraq and Iran are part of what was the Persian Empire, was part of Babylonia for a while, Chaldea, way back in the Old Testament times. But as the church grew there, they were separate from the Roman Empire. And it was called Church of the East.